The one thing I want to clarify is what Councilmember Miller said, was that the amount that we're discussing, the $15,000, $15,795.25, is because of some antiquated electric rules and water rules that we have, water rule number 6 and electric rule number 10 specifically, which only allow us to go back so far to collect the debt. But the actual debt was, according to our meter lady, Stacy, was $38,850.99, excluding the same number of years of waste management trash, which would probably add about another $1,800. But because of water rule number 6 and electric rule number 10, the actual amounts that is outstanding is $15,795.25. But before I go on, I want to discuss the bizarre way that this has been handled so far in the city. This report was physically served on the city on April the 25th. According to committee number 4 chairman, the grand jury report was addressed to the mayor, as all official correspondence should have been, and it was personally delivered to the city manager's secretary, of which then it was delivered to the city clerk, and the city clerk, because it was marked confidential, did not open it and timestamp it and placed it in the mayor's box. The report should have been given to the city manager. And the city manager at that time should have probably called a special meeting, made copies of the report, and disseminated amongst the council members. Unfortunately, that was not done, and the report was kept by the mayor. Now, the following day was a council meeting on April the 26th. And on April the 26th, the council members arrived, and the city manager discussed nothing in closed session, nor did he mention that there was a grand jury report hand-delivered to the city and served on the city. But yet at that same meeting that night, we had the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ron Duncan, appear in this council chamber and make several comments to the public that he was here specifically to see and monitor as to whether I, Councilmember Don Peterson, would mention the grand jury report, and if so, they were going to file suit against me. The ironic thing is that I didn't know that the grand jury report had been served. The mayor knew it was served, but somehow the mayor divulged that information to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, because there's no other way the president of the chamber would have known about the grand jury report. They're very specific as to who they release information to. So what that did was it deprived the city of an opportunity to gather its legislators or its council members and get together to create a press release, to elect a spokesperson, to allow the city to respond to the grand jury report, but instead it just left it entirely open. I did not know about it officially until Thursday morning, which would have been the 28th, 29th, when the grand jury released it to the public, when they put it on their website. Me, as a council person for this city, did not see the report until that time, which I just find absolutely ironic. Now, Art Welch, as the mayor, the item was addressed to him, but the city manager was derelict of his duty and didn't accept the grand jury's report and left it with the mayor. It was not his personal mail, it was official mail addressed to the city and to be addressed by the city attorney. I don't know when the city attorney was advised, have no idea, haven't asked him, as to when he was notified that the grand jury report had been served on the city. So that brings us to where we are now, that we were all in the dark, and here we are. As far as when was the Chamber of Commerce notified officially that they have a bill, I found out about the bill by accident in June of 2014. And like I normally do, I continue to scream and yell until somebody listens to me. Well, I screamed and yelled until, at that time, interim city manager Homer Croy sent a letter of demand to the Chamber of Commerce. And at that time, Mr. Don Robinson was the director of the Chamber. So the letter was directed to Don, and that was dated July 16th, 2014, signed by Mr. Croy, and the final paragraph on that was that if you are unable to pay all fees due, please contact me. But anyway, please remit the amount in full, $15,795.25 by August 31st. So there was a letter of demand. Letter of demand was mailed July 16th, 2014. And there was several correspondence and delays, in going on. Then we got the return that will offer you a mere pittance per month, $32 a month for 41 years was their alternate payback. This had been going on for a long time, and I asked at that time Assistant City Manager June Overholt, how is it that this happened when you are in charge of all of the finance? Is there something in your system that there's some kind of flag that pops up, something that shows in your ledger book, something that shows in your accounting, something that's there, some little person that pops up, some minion that says, hey, I'm not paid? And she says, there is. And I said, then you have either allowed it or you have been told to leave it alone. I said, which is it? She said, I was told to leave it alone. And I said, and by whom? And she said, by then City Manager Andy Takata. That it was, quote, called an administrative practice, that we don't bill the Chamber of Commerce. So when we refer to this, it's referred to as an administrative practice. So I continued to be on this issue about the bill. When are we going to collect the bill? When are we going to collect the bill? And the bill just continues to linger on. And then Art Welch, the mayor, is appointed as the liaison. Well, that's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house, You can't do that when he's had an involvement with the chamber for the last 30 years, I guess. Forever he's been involved. President, I don't know how many times, in and out, heavily involved with the chamber, and I commend him for his involvement. But there's a huge conflict there, and furthermore, he's one who's wanted to just forgive the debt in its entirety. And there was a story as to why we should forgive the debt, and I want to make sure that I give the complete story. And Art told me that years ago, where the police department is sitting, there was a piece of land there owed by the chamber. And the chamber donated that land to the city, and therefore they knocked it down, and that's where the police department is today. And in lieu of the land, they gave them the building across the street for $1 a year on a 50-year lease. So that's how that came about. But when you dig a little bit further and you go actually into their lease, which let me get to the lease. Under paragraph 9, is called utilities. Tenant agrees to pay as additional rent before delinquency for all water, sewer, gas, heat, light, power, telephone service, refuse removal, and all other utilities or services of any kind supplied to the premises. So it was already there. It's in the lease. It was never waived in the lease. It was never forgiven in the lease. And they signed it. That they, meaning Jim Smith. Jim Smith was the one who signed the lease back then. So they negotiated the lease. Jim signed the lease. It also said that the tenant agrees to keep and maintain public liability and property damage insurance respecting the premises, naming the landlord as an additional insured. That goes in number 7, in paragraph 7. And then if we look at paragraph 16, it's called default. The occurrence of any one or more of the following shall constitute a default by the tenant. Failure by tenant to make payment of rent or any other payments required to be made by the tenant hereunder as when due. I mean, it's pretty clear where the lease goes, what it says, and what has happened. So I'm talking to the city manager, or city managers by that time probably, to the point where I became frustrated, and in February of 2015, I filed a complaint with the grand jury. And I wrote my complaint, I sent it in, the grand jury heard it before the entire grand jury, and they accepted the complaint. Well, it was assigned to committee number 4, and they investigated it up until June 30th of 2015. When that particular grand jury ceased to exist, and then on July 1st, the 2016 or 2015-2016 grand jury took over. So what that meant was I had to resubmit a new complaint to the new grand jury. So that's what I did. I wrote another complaint based on the first complaint. It was read before the whole grand jury, and the complaint was accepted by the 2015-2016 grand jury, which now brings us up to their delivery of the final report. It hasn't been an easy process. This has been a tactical delay all along. It was never intended for the chamber to ever pay for this. There's members on this council who really don't like it, and I'm sure right now they're hating me for bringing up what I'm doing. But there's an incestuous web within this city of people involved in charities. If we look at our mayor, or at our former mayor, Debbie Franklin, she has the Holiday Wish program, which is supposedly under the Chamber of Commerce, but which has never been on their tax returns, has no knowledge of it. Her charity is not registered with the Attorney General's office. It's not registered with the Secretary of State's office. It's not registered with the Internal Revenue Service. But yet, she's receiving free rent from Ramsey Storage on a storage bin in the charity's name, a charity that doesn't exist. And this is the way that it goes. They had, when they were given the building, they were also given the entire building, which included, and I'm talking about the chamber, which also included the where the gas company is. So they ended up negotiating. Jim Smith was one of that. He signed the lease with the gas company, and where they negotiated the lease down per square foot if they would pay in advance, and so they got a $219,000 advance in the rent for 17 years and paid in cash. We don't know where that money's at today. I don't know in the last 2 years how many golf tournaments that the Chamber of Commerce has had, how many car shows they've had, but there's still been no money come forward. And I know that with each golf tournament, they make anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000, $13,000 per tournament. That certainly one tournament could have paid to $15,000. So here we are. We've got a mayor that's linked wholeheartedly to the chamber. He was even on the Chamber's agent for process, agent of service, with the Secretary of State until a few months ago when Ron came in and cleaned it up. Up until a few months ago, they were suspended, their corporation was suspended by the Secretary of State and the Franchise Tax Board, until Ron Duncan came in and took over and he straightened it out. So here they are soliciting funds, holding golf tournaments when they're not even authorized and legal to do so. So the whole thing is an absolute mess. I agree that every city needs a Chamber of Commerce. We have to have a Chamber of Commerce, but I don't believe Banning has to have this Chamber of Commerce. I personally think that it needs a complete revamping. It needs to have a fresh start with fresh blood and fresh people to where it's going to come in and do the city good. There are former members that are no longer members, and for various reasons, they don't want to be affiliated with it, but it's the same old crowd, the same old cronies who just keep coming in and coming in and coming in, which seems to be the thing all over town. And according to the city manager, he's advised that the Attorney General is here, and he's already looking at charities in town. So with the Attorney General in town looking at charities, the grand jury report looking at charities, it's telling us that we as a city need to take a look and a close look at what's going on right underneath our nose and start protecting the people's money. When you look at how many shelters and 501c3s and C6s that have received money from the city and what has happened, and as much as I hate to say it, Don, the Banning Cultural Alliance, $1.4 million. And what has they produced for $1.4 million of taxpayer money? And we can go on with what the chamber has done. You figure they took $200,000 in rent, and on a 50-year lease at $2,000 a month, you figure out how much that is. These are all taxpayer subsidized activities and 501c3s that this city cannot afford to pay. We can't afford it. That's not what we do. That's not what we're here for. And as your council person, I'm here to watch your money, and this is not where we want it. I'd like to see our roads fixed. I'd like to see downtown fixed, but it's not going to happen as long as there's cronyism, as long as there's these black abyss that money keeps going down into, and it needs to stop. There's so much that I can say. I have a 4-inch binder here that's filled with material, filled with evidence, filled with it all, that would make you sick when you sit and read it. But it's time, if the chamber wants to remain a chamber, then the chamber can go find a new home. But it can't stay in the people's house. And the house belongs to the people. And they can't be subsidized anymore. They've taken enough an advantage of the people long enough. The lease is quite clear, and if the city attorney doesn't have a copy of it, I'll give him a copy. And it's quite clear about how default is, how long this has been going on, and it's time that an eviction start and they go find a new home, they dissolve, they go whatever, and they start over again. And I haven't even touched on the other Banning chamber, that one, that was set up on a specific issue to laundry money. So there's all kinds of things with your chamber that you really need to know, and it really needs to stop, and it's time that it goes. So my recommendation is, for the city, is that we evict them based upon the items in the lease, or either that or give them 30 days to deposit $10,000 into a maintenance fund. And the grand jury didn't say a bond, it said $10,000. You can't spend a bond, you need to spend the money, $10,000 into the bank, $15,000 to pay for their utility, get their insurance with an additional assured endorsement, or an eviction is processed within 30 days. If the chamber, after being in business 100 years, cannot go to the bank and borrow $30,000, then it's a non-credit-worthy organization that doesn't need to be a charity for the city. And that's where I'm at.